Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. Why do you care so much about the Rittenhouse trial? This has been something that I've been hearing a lot in the last 5 days or so. I've had so many of the people, white people in particular, who follow me on Twitter, individuals who have never posted so much as a comment or even a single solitary like on my Twitter. And yet this last week, they couldn't contain themselves. And these white supremacist troll accounts, these lurkers, they've been asking, why do you care? Now, of course, the obvious response to that would be, why do you care? None of the individuals involved had any connection to you. You don't know them. You don't care about them. You can't forget about them fast enough. So why do you care so much? But you know me, whenever I give a rhetorical beat down to these white supremacists, I never do it halfway. Now, before I get started, keep in mind, as Neely Fuller and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing have both observed, the white supremacists know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what they're doing. They like to play dumb. And a lot of black folks like to play dumb right along with them. So before we get started, let's make sure we understand. We are not at all fooled by these phony pretenses of ignorance on the part of these white supremacist apologists and sympathizers. They're just pretending. I don't understand. You understand exactly what the issue is. But since you decided you want to step in it, you're going to get that business now. I'm going to go ahead and explain to you exactly why it is that we're devoting so much time to the Kyle Rittenhouse mass shooting. The reason that we care so much about making sure Kyle Rittenhouse is punished is because this is a pattern of young white males taken to the streets with guns shooting at black people. June of 2015, Dylan Roof decided that he was going to go to a black church and kill a bunch of black grandmothers and the pastor. Why? Because he didn't like black people. And instead of condemning him, you had a mealy-mouthed governor who took several days before she figured out that something bad had happened here. And you had Fox News saying it was astonishing that anyone thought that this was racial. And Dylan Roof wasn't even the only example from that year. Just a few months later, in Minneapolis, you had some white supremacist 4chan racists who decided that they were going to make the people protesting the murder of Jamar Clark disperse. Young white males picking up firearms and deciding they're going to go miles and miles so they can find a group of black people protesting police violence and then starting gunfights there against people who have no weapons at all. They showed up and started shooting at people. And these were not some 40 and 50 and 60-something good old boys. These were basically very, very young white youth, ages 26, 27, 23, 21. These guys are freaking millennials, and look at what the hell it is that they're up to. They had absolutely no problems whatsoever with that group of people. Nobody at that BLM protest had done anything to them, but they decided merely their presence there, the fact that they were protesting, they're going to pick up some guns and make them disperse. So you had these guys doing this long before Kyle Rittenhouse. This is a tradition among these gun-toting white supremacist young males. Because the Rittenhouse mass shooting, that's supposed to be just the thin end of the wedge. They're trying to mobilize all of their little crackpot white supremacist race soldiers. They're trying to mobilize them. And they want to pretend as if, oh, this is just some freak incident. We're showing, this is part of a pattern. They desperately want that murderer to walk. They want a mass killer to walk. They want to establish the principle that you can go to an anti-police violence protest, murder multiple protesters, and then not be punished. That's the reason why these idiots who are pretending as if, I don't know why you're so concerned. You look at their Twitter and you see that's the main thing they're concerned with. They spend all their time attacking BLM, attacking anyone who even criticizes the police, and then they come to us and go, I don't know why you're so concerned. It's because you're so concerned. When we see the white supremacists pushing propaganda and lies, you're dang right the black media is going to be there pushing the truth. So that's reason one, because it is our job to call out white supremacy.
But none of the 4 people involved were black. They were all white. What does this have to do with black people?
The Rittenhouse mass shooting has everything to do with black people. We're the entire reason that it even happened. The entire reason that Kyle Rittenhouse went to Kenosha in the first place was because there were black people protesting the attempted murder of Jacob Blake, a black man who was wounded and nearly killed at the hands of a race soldier for the local thugs in blue. Rittenhouse went there in an attempt to carry out an ambush attack on those black protesters. The fact that it was white ones that he wound up killing, that was incidental. They were not the reason he was there. It was the black people protesting the attempted murder of a black man. That's what had Rittenhouse all eager to pick up an assault rifle and go there to stage an ambush. The white supremacists are carrying out a race war. And Kyle Rittenhouse is a soldier in that race war. He is a self-appointed soldier. Or to put it in more appropriate military terms, he's an enemy combatant. He gave himself permission to enlist in the irregular forces of white supremacy. That's the reason why he wanted to be hanging around with cops. I'm going to be a police explorer. I'm going to be a cop one day. Then I'll be able to kill black people legally because the cops been teaching me how to do it. And his mother has been training him to be a race soldier. His perverted idolizing of the police. His absolutely degenerate sticking up for the Blue Lives Matters talking point. He assaulted a white teenage girl last year, July 1st. And it was 2 black teenagers who came to that white girl's aid. And those 2 black teenagers, they stomped Rittenhouse out. And the video got posted online, so Rittenhouse got a helping of humiliation with that beatdown. Now the question then becomes, did the violent white supremacist thug Rittenhouse think very often about those 2 black teenagers who stopped his violent assault? Did he spend much time thinking about them? We know that he did. Because only a few weeks later, there was video of him griping and complaining and just angrily gnashing his teeth at the uprisings taking place during the summer. Now, none of those uprisings were taking place near where Rittenhouse lived. None of them involved him or anyone that he knew. And yet, Rittenhouse was absolutely obsessed with those protests. Black protests. Black people protesting white supremacists like him for carrying out murders and violent assaults on black people. He was absolutely obsessed with black protesters. And Rittenhouse followed the protests constantly. He was fixated on them to the point where he was on video saying he wished he had his AR-15 because if he did, he'd be shooting at people. During the trial, the prosecutor asked him if he understood that he cannot legally shoot people to quote unquote defend other people's property. The prosecutor asked him, do you understand you legally can't do that? And Rittenhouse responded, yeah, I know that I can't shoot someone to protect somebody else's car. Yeah, and he understood that last year too. Yet after making this online confession last year, just 2 weeks later, Rittenhouse, a minor, illegally took an AR-15 across state lines. He drove dozens of miles to Kenosha because he knew that was where some black people would be at. We are involved in this because Rittenhouse didn't go to Kenosha to kill white people. He went there to kill black people. You're an inbred moron if you actually think we're going to give him a pass just because some white people incidentally came between him and the black people that he was actually there to kill. We're giving our 2 cents about the Rittenhouse mass shooting because when Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old, was merely playing in the park, all it took was a phone call from some white supremacist suspect busybody and the police showed up and murdered him on the spot. A child, simply because someone said he had a gun. Police never actually saw anything. They just saw a black child, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Kyle Rittenhouse walks down the street after the police hear a volley of gunshots. Here you got a guy with an assault rifle strapped to him. He's sitting here walking toward you, and the police, they give him a thumbs up and a good job. So a black child standing in the park makes you afraid for your life, but a white teenager who's dang near a grown man with an assault rifle walking towards you, that's cause for an attaboy and a thumbs up. Because after all, we all know that nobody associates white teenagers with mass shootings, certainly not at schools. So there's no reason for there to be any sort of stigma, right? Black children are routinely murdered in this country by the police, unarmed black children. Black children routinely thrown on the ground and held at gunpoint. They have no weapons on them at all. The police acknowledge you got no weapons on you, and yet half the force shows up, guns drawn, on black children. So you're doggone right. We're going to hold everyone to account. If black children are being murdered and being held at gunpoint and their lives threatened merely because they walk down the street or stand in the park, or the police just see an opportunity to harm them, then why is it that you got a gun-toting suspected white supremacist thug who just murdered two people? You got people pointing at him and saying he just shot people, and the cops, they drive right on by, but not before they give him a good job and a thumbs up. Whenever a black child is killed by some white supremacist, be they in the police or not, all we get from the white media is, did that black kid have any disciplinary problems? Anyone complain about him? Any brushes with the law? Something we can use to smear him. Meanwhile, with Rittenhouse, this guy's beating up female classmates after school. This guy clearly has a violent streak, and yet the white media has had a total media blackout on mentioning any of his violent tendencies. And they have done this for over a year now. So clearly, there's an organized agenda at work. There's a program at work here. When it comes to white males who are accused of violence, well, we need to talk about him as a human interest story. His neighbors like, oh, how surprising. No one could have seen this coming. And if you can't get away with that, then just don't mention it at all. We just won't say anything about him at all. So that's why you got the black grassroots weighing in on this. And why we relish all these white supremacist troll accounts who keep complaining, why are you talking about this? Your white supremacist tears taste delicious. And all of your continued whining and complaining, that's just music to my ears. Alright, so that explains why it is that the black grassroots have taken to task on this, but it doesn't explain why all these white supremacists are so concerned about it. Why are they so hot and bothered? Why do they care about this? Rittenhouse didn't own any property in Kenosha. And the 3 white men that he murdered, if not wounded, those individuals, they had not been involved in any criminality. They also were not being arrested by the police or otherwise the focus of the protests. They weren't the reason why anybody was protesting. So why are the white supremacists, why are they so determined to defend this murder? Do they like the idea of having all of these white teenagers running around with assault rifles? These are the same people, by the way, who claim that, well, we don't believe that teenagers should be having guns, especially not after a mass shooting at a school. And yet all of a sudden they're going, well, what's wrong with the teenager running around with an assault rifle? What's wrong with that? Yeah, now they're showing what they really believe when you put the scumbags under pressure. But it goes beyond that. Why are these white supremacists so fixated on sticking up for someone who they know to be a mass shooter? Why are they so determined they're going to protect him at all costs? It's because of what he represents to white supremacy. White supremacists are carrying out a race war. And a crucial part of wars, particularly wars fought over ideology, is the use of proxies. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the concept, a proxy is someone who stands in as a substitute for someone else. We saw a lot of this during the so-called Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The US and the Soviet Union could not take on each other directly, so what happened was you had a series of proxy wars that took place between the end of World War II and all the way up until the 1990s. Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, all of these became nothing more than theaters for proxy wars between the United States and the Soviet Union. We're weighing in on this for the same reason that the U.S. got involved in the war in Afghanistan. The United States had no people or property in Afghanistan, and yet when the Soviets invaded that country in 1979, the U.S. leapt to its feet and was all of a sudden just the biggest fans of Afghanistan you ever saw. But the U.S.'s involvement and support went way beyond mere words. The U.S. had the CIA flood Afghanistan with weapons, from rifles, landmines, and RPGs to cutting-edge weapons like the Stinger missile launcher. But the U.S. went beyond that. It also sent so-called advisors to Afghanistan. Only these advisors were Navy SEALs and other military experts whose job was to teach the Afghan Mujahideen rebels advanced infantry and insurgency tactics, to give the Afghan military intelligence that the U.S. had on the Soviets. They were using the Afghans as a proxy army against the Soviet Union. That's what happened in that war. The U.S. understood fully that the issue wasn't Afghanistan. It was stopping the spread of communism. And you know what? It's the same thing for us. The issue here isn't just stopping one white supremacist mass shooter. It's stopping the spread of white supremacy which is on the march. White supremacy that Rittenhouse is a foot soldier for. A lot of these white supremacists and their sock puppet accounts, they see us pushing back against this and identifying it for what it is. And they're scared. They should be. They have a lot riding on this verdict. We don't. You see, we can hit or miss, but the bad guys, they can't miss once. They saw how quickly things turned. They thought they were running the boards for a good long while. They got away with the murder of Trayvon Martin, got away with murdering another child, Tamir Rice. Why, they were on a roll. You can't touch us. And then came the murder of Walter Scott. Michael Slager went down. And then went the murder of Laquan McDonald. That resurfaced. And Jason Van Dyke went down. And Amber Geiger's went down. And then Derek Chauvin went down. And all of a sudden they're going, man, the tide has turned. We can't stop this. We're just getting run over here. They're just steamrolling us. And you're right. We are. And we're only just getting started. I think it was TBA who quoted a NRA executive as having said, every victory fuels the next victory and every defeat fuels the next defeat. Well, as a white supremacist armed advocacy group, the NRA ought to know all about that one. That is the white supremacist ethos in a nutshell. They've got to make sure that the trend always goes in their favor. They can't afford to have anything going against them. See, black folks have conditioned ourselves that we basically wait until white supremacy has us on our deathbeds before we do something about it. The white supremacists, they don't do that. They're always looking at the horizon. And if they see anything that even remotely resembles a threat or a challenge to their power, they immediately pounce on it to stomp it out of existence. It is because of the fact that the white supremacists believe in that practice of going after anything, no matter how small, if it seems to be a threat to them. That's what's made it where even though they are weaker than us, they still wind up having the upper hand because they're proactive where it counts. Now, on the other hand, when we start standing up and stepping forward and throwing our weight around, well, as we've shown just in the last few years, we'll have the bastards on their heels. And it won't take us decades to do it. So for all you little white supremacist sock puppet accounts running around pretending that I'm just asking, just as a concerned person, I'm just asking, I'm just curious, why are you so concerned about it? Yeah, mass shooter goes to an anti-police violence rally and shoots 3 people, killing 2 of them. Gee, why would anyone be concerned about that? For the same reason that you had white people all across the country, from Ricky Schroeder to other unhinged white supremacists, deciding to give their little state mental disability money to put up a legal fund for this idiot to give him bail money. Don't any of these white supremacists have anything better to do with their time and with the people's money than to support mass shooting teenage thugs? But that's exactly the point. As far as they're concerned, Kyle Rittenhouse is exactly what they need for their well-regulated white supremacist militia. You white supremacists, you're trying to get some momentum going. You think that this is going to be just like the murder of Trayvon Martin. It's going to be a watershed event. You can openly kill people. You can murder people if they protest police violence. You're trying to establish a new normal. And we're standing in the way of that. Because that's what moral people do. You push, and we push back. Only we push back harder. Good day, and be one.